G'day and welcome back to my channel. Now, I woke up this morning and we had 1 million views. I kid you not, yes. There's been 1 million views to the channel, and if I had a shekel for every single one of those views, well, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd be up in bloody Barbados or something, having some nubile bloody Barbadian rub oil all over my back. But that's another story. This is another one of my Gooch episodes, and I want to talk about something that pisses me off. Yes, it does. Instructions. We don't need them. No, they're rubbish. They're garbage. They're sort of guidelines, really. What am I on about? Well, I don't follow the instructions. Terrible, you say. Terrible. Well, I've been building models for a long time, but the instructions are not correct for the way you'd build a model. I'm not kidding. The manufacturers have had it wrong for ages, and I'm going to explain why in this video that, don't follow the instructions. You can get much better models if you build it a certain way. All right, so this will be the Uninstructed Gooch. Yes, want to know more? Hang in there. Roll the music. A big shout out to my patrons. Thanks guys, you really make it possible for me to do more of these sort of videos. And that's why we're having more tugs these days. I'm enjoying them. Are you? Anyhow, if you'd like to become a Patreon supporter, and then you can basically suggest topics for my tugs, and you can become much more interactive, and you can basically help me choose what the next content will be. Yeah, you get control. So, click the link or the button or whatever. There's something on some device. You look for, I think it's the big P, and it's like in a pink background or something. I don't know. Anyhow, enough of that. Instructions, they're crap. They're useless. Well, not always. But I have a problem with instructions, and let me break it down. I mean, I'll do various sorts of subjects of models and tell you my approach, and maybe that might be interesting for you, and it might show you the way I solve certain problems. For instance, ships. How many of you have bought, one 350 scale battleship, thought this is great, it's the first time you've had one, you've built the whole thing, that's fantastic, then you go to paint it. You can't. Well, it's virtually impossible. You can't get it right. There's no way. There's too many fiddly bits. There's too many layers. It just doesn't happen, okay? If you're going to build a ship, and this is how I would do it, I would start painting stuff probably before I even take it off the sprues. A lot of things would just get painted on the sprues. But I would paint the hull well before I've done anything else. And I'd probably test fit and assemble that hull without the deck and make sure that I've got it painted correctly, got the plimsoll on, all that sort of thing. Then the decks, I'll paint those well before I do anything else. Why? Because the superstructure and the various armaments and all the greebles that go on there, they're all going to get in the way. And in fact, I even buy the wooden veneer decks if I can get them. And that way I can basically spray the deck the model colour, get my veneer on, which works like a great big mask. I mean, you can make a mask if you like. You ever try to mask a deck out for a battleship? Oh, you ever try to hand paint all the greebles? Oh. I mean, some manufacturers like, I think it's Fujimi, have a look, I can't see. I've got a kit here, and they were brilliant. All the greebles in the kit, all the things go on the deck, all the little fittings and everything, they're separate. You glue them on, which drove some people crazy, but it allowed you basically to pretty well spray the deck one colour and then go on and add all your little bits that are going to be different. And as you work your way up with a ship, even if it's not a battleship, even a sailing ship, for instance, again, I would paint the hull. I'd probably paint a lot of things off the model, well, before you even start the model, on the sprue even. Like especially if you've got the rear of a sailing ship and it has all the windows and it has all the frilly little scrolly business and all the cauliflower as they call it. That'll all get painted well before we even go to construction stage. Then the hull will be put together, and I might even paint that again before we even assemble it, because you have to paint the inside, the gunnels, and you have to paint the outside, and there's details. You don't want to be doing that while you've got cannons in the way and rigging or whatever. You can't do it. It's impossible. So you must paint and sort things out before you move ahead with ships. It's really one of the only logical ways to do it to get a really good result. And as you work your way up, you build sub-assemblies, which are superstructures. You build your bridge at the front, you build your stern sort of area. Usually those things, they're all made separately. Now, lately a lot of manufacturers have been separating that. Trumpeter does that. Excellent. And that's good. But again, those sub-assemblies, at what point do you paint them? Well, I paint them when I've got it to a point where I am going to put a deck in, a wood deck, or I'm going to basically have to add a little bit of deck painting. Well, before I put guns and rails or anything, I will spray paint that sub-assembly, which means I'm going to have to jump around in the instructions to find everything that's the basic construction for that sub-assembly, build that first, then paint it, then go back into the instructions and find where all the little greebles and everything go on. So I'm always working through my instructions and penciling out things as I go. In fact, I'll sit and look at the instructions and make notes as to where I should start and what I shouldn't do. I plan it out. And I've known from experience, this actually is a lot faster. Even though you're spending all that extra time planning, it works out a lot faster because you are not having that dreadful thing of trying to get a paintbrush in and paint something and splattering it and having to touch it up. And plus you can airbrush most things. I mean, I love to be able to airbrush and paint everything and then assemble it, and I get good, crisp, clear demarcation lines between my various parts. So with a ship, that's it. I would be basically working out everything as sub-assemblies, putting it together, getting decks painted and decks veneered and things like that, getting holes painted well before I add anything. There are times when there are things you still need to add, and I made that mistake with the Varag. I realised later on that the booms along the side of the ship, which are the torpedo net, I'd never done one like that before, probably best to put those on first. So it's a case of colour. If it's all the same colour, glue it together. Glue it together, put it all together, spray it that colour or hand paint it that colour, whatever. And this brings me to automobiles, right? Like a little Fiat I'm working there, a little scary fart. With that kit, I found every single piece that was a body part in the body colour, and I assembled it first. So I was going through the instructions all over the place, jumping, between stages 1 to stage 50, all over the place, looking for things. Luckily, they're usually marked with this is the body colour. So I would find every single one of those, and in most cases, there wasn't anything hindering it being put on now, right? There'll be bits added to it later, but it wasn't getting in the way. You've got to watch for that. You can't put a part on, glue it and paint it, and then later on go, oh dear, that's in the way. Now, you've got to think it through a bit. Have a look around, see what's there. But basically, I pretty well assembled all the body parts and built the doors on and everything, and then I sprayed the whole body. And it was completed. And I haven't had to add any other body parts. And again, other parts that are silver or grey or whatever, they are all pre-painted, and then it's assembled on. So basically, as the model is built, I'm not really painting much at all, hardly at all. Might be touching up the odd thing, especially when you've had to cut off a sprue point, or you've had to sand something, then you have to come back and touch it up. But that's it. There's only tiny touch-ups. All of my painting's done. I mean, I proved this aircraft. Go back and watch what I did with the Rodin kit for the Junkers. I think it's a D2 or something. Okay, it was the first full aluminium monoplane just at the end of World War One. It was the first fighter like that. I mean, everything else was canvas and wood and all the rest of it, and they were mainly biplanes, triplanes and so on. This was a monoplane, and the wing was lowered, not a high wing, not like the D8, a high wing. This wing was lowered like a conventional aircraft you see in World War II. Now, I actually painted the whole thing in primer. I used Steiner's coloured primer, which I could tint with life colour paints because they're all water-based, and there are acrylics that are water-based, they're all compatible. Go and watch my other gooch about what acrylics aren't acrylics. But anyhow, I painted everything on the sprue. If you go and watch the very first video unboxing, I show the whole sprues have been painted. And then it's only later on when I need to do some touching up. There's a bit of aluminium for the cradling that had to be done sort of separately because I changed my mind. I needed to basically airbrush on some aluminium after I built the cradle. But basically, the kit was painted on the sprue, built, touched up, and that was it, finished. This gave me a wonderfully clear demarcation line on the wings, right? So the lower wing to the upper wing was an absolute crisp edge. Now I needed this because the wings on that Junkers are corrugated. All the old Junkers are corrugated, right? All the wings are wobbly. So if you glued it together and then try to sand those edges and then try and paint along there, it would be a nightmare. You can't mask corrugation, well, at least not very well. So this is why I painted everything and then I assembled it. Admittedly, I dry fit and I sanded and I made sure everything was a perfect fit first. In that case, I actually had cut the wings off the sprue and painted all the camo colour, did everything put together. But again, that's not how the instructions would have told me. Now, Armour. Armour is one of the few things, you could pretty well build it any way you like, and once it's finished, paint it all one colour, paint it all green, paint it all dunkel crap, paint it all whatever, okay? Panzer Glup, right? Whatever. You can sort of get away. And that's the thing. Armour builders, and if you come from armour building, you can just assemble the whole thing and then paint it. You don't have to worry as long as you're not doing interiors. Generally, that's it, and that's your method. It doesn't work necessarily with aircraft. I know a lot of people will just paint the interior, the cabin on an aircraft, and then glue the body together and everything, and paint all that. But there's a lot of cases where you can pre-paint the parts. And this is not how the instructions would give it to you. So what I'm saying is, sometimes it's worth sitting down with a beverage of your choice, working your way through the instructions for your kit, and having a look at, well, all these things fit together and they make one sub-assembly and they're all one colour before greebles are added, okay? Generalising it. And if that's the case, build that sub-assembly. Make sure it's not going to interfere with anything else, and then paint it. One last point, though, on not following instructions. Dragon. Well, if anybody's built a Dragon kit, you know how useless their instructions usually are, okay? Usually you have to research everything because they want you to put stuff on upside down, back to front, or the wrong position. Or their classic is, because it's the reissue of the reissue of the reissue, they're cutting and pasting bits of instructions from about 3 or 4 different kits, slamming it together and calling it a new version, and nobody's actually bothered to go through the logic and realise that half the parts, they're not even mentioned. They just suddenly appear in the drawings later on, and you go, how did that get there? Now I've got to put that there, but that's not there. So you have to literally go through and check, is every part actually in the instructions, and then work it all out for yourself. One kit manufacturer that actually caught me out on my not following instructions was Meng. The Meng FT17, I was kind of smart and I changed things around a bit. Really, if I checked their instructions a bit more, I would have realised they actually have got it right, and you do need to follow their method. And it does allow for pre-painting. And in fact, they're giving indications of all the paints to use anyway. So my method doesn't always work to the letter, but if I'd paid a bit more attention, I probably would have got it right. Anyway, I hope that's a sort of a thought provoker into don't slavishly follow blindly the instructions, because most kit manufacturers, they don't actually think it through. They kind of just divide things up and go here and glue here, and and especially ships, they're just about impossible to paint if you assemble them all and then try and paint them. It is just too hard, and it's just, there's no way you can get a decent finish. It's really, really, really difficult, but it's so much easier if you do it. A classic one would be one recent one I had was Trumpeter, where they had you assembling the hull to start with, sure, but they didn't put the propeller brackets and propeller shafts on to right at the edge for the screws, right? Now, if you don't put those on earlier on, and you paint. If you put them on later, you're going to have to sand, you're going to have to clean up, you might have to putty it. That's integral to the kit. So again, this falls back on my maxim. Have a look at what is a sub-assembly. Not what the kit says, what is a whole thing that goes together. And if that whole thing can be painted, see if you can get it out of the way first. You'll learn by trial and error, and certainly my method is not perfect, as I've illustrated a couple of times. It didn't work. I still got a result, and I still managed to work my way through it. But instructions, nah, they just don't work for me. They're guidelines. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that. And again, if you'd like to see more of my videos and you'd like to see them early and without advertising, consider becoming a patron. Links are around, buttons, whatever. Push something will happen. All right, that's it. Like, comment, subscribe. Just be nice about it, all right? Okay, it's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.